Good morning. Good morning, everybody. It's Tammy with Art by Tammy Lassiter. I am looking for my live over here on my laptop. Here it is. All right, there I am, all up, and I've got one person currently on. Thank you for being here. I'm Tammy Lassiter. I am a multimedia artist. I'm currently in the process of moving into my new studio, and so my current studio is kind of in a shambles. Good morning, Marianne. I have been painting with acrylics every morning. But just related to the current state of everything, watercolor seems to be more of the easier medium to use. It involves less of my materials and then stuff that I can pull together pretty quickly. And so I can work around them, in other words. And so if you've never worked with watercolor, I hope and encourage you to give them a try. They're a lot of fun. They are very different than acrylics. If you have only been an acrylic artist and moved to watercolor, it does take a lot of practice in order to get into the groove of it. And as a matter of fact, up until Tuesday, I probably had not touched my watercolors for quite some time. And so I'm still trying to get back into the groove, but we did paint our lily pads on Tuesday. So if you missed that tutorial, it is still up on thank you so much. I appreciate that, Marianne. The tutorial is still up on my page. Just scroll down my feed and you will find it. I will be returning back to acrylics as soon as I can get to a space and time where I can easily get things. Hey, Christine, welcome. Good morning. As soon as I can get myself into a better, more established situation. But right now I'm moving things and going through things, and we'll be going through things again and purging and doing all the stuff. And it's kind of like a purging system twice. But I have accumulated a lot of stuff. I'm getting a sinus infection, I think, so I've got some water nearby, and I'm trying to keep hydrated. Working in all the drywall dust. We're starting on that back room, and we got all the drywall up, taped, mudded. In 2 days, we did all of that, and my husband painted it, and it looks great. It looks fantastic. And I doubt that we're going to do much more to that space because it's behind closed walls, and it looks good. All right, I'm going to start by using a fairly large brush and dampening, and hopefully y'all can see my water over here to the edge a little bit. And I'm just wiping off any excess. I'm going to go ahead and wet my paper. I have sketched out just a very simple landscape. I'm working on 100% cotton cold press paper. And I'm just going to wet my paper thoroughly until I see a nice sheen on it. And I don't see any dry spots. Awesome. All right, now I'm just going to I've already wet my paints. I got them over here to the side, and it's impossible for me to get this big honking thing in screen. So I'm going to take just some of my golds, and I'm just going to lay this in here. I'm just laying it in wet on wet, right over top of my drawing. Right over top of it. And let's see, maybe a little bit of I'm just taking it right out of my, I'm taking two different colors of yellow here, and I'm going to lay some of this down right here. I have kind of a pathway going along, and we'll just work it in. I'm even going to work it in here on the roof a little bit. Okay. This is a 6x9 piece of watercolor paper, and I have taped it off to fit a 5x7, to do a 5x7. I see a little white space over here I missed. Let me grab some of this darker color. I'm going to just tap in a little bit of these darker, oops, put it in the wrong water. Some of these little darker spots along, especially along in here on this side. And that way, when it dries, I'll have some variations there. Hey, Marcia. I hope you're doing well. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sore. I'm feeling really old these days. It's like every morning I'm waking up, and with my morning meds, I'm taking ibuprofen. I don't know. It's just, it is what it is. All right, I'm just going to take my number 10 round, and I'm going to start picking up some of my greens now. And I've got a little shell over here. Sometimes I mix on. So maybe I will. And I also have a spray bottle. I've already sprayed these once, but I'm going to mist them again. It's really dry in my house. And so we're going to just kind of take and add myself a little bit of a, just going to kind of go across here, and I love the effects this gives, and I'm just kind of pulling that in, pulling. So it's remember that with watercolor, you're going to have a different effect. I'm going to pull in some of these yellows as well. I'm going to get some of this yellow over here on my shell. I don't know what my colors are on my thing anymore. I used to know every one of them, but since it's been a while, I'm going to pull in some of this sap green. Now, what would make a really pretty green too is I'm just going to pull some of these up and just do some jiggles along the way. And very loose. I'm trying to keep this very loose, a little bit more atmospheric. Now, since my paper is buckling, a lot of this yellow right here is just going to kind of sit there. So I'm going to take and scoop some of this off of here. And I'm taking my damp or wet brush, not my wet brush, but a damper brush, and scooping that away, because if I use a wet brush, it's just going to add to the puddle. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit of my ultramarine blue over here to this mixture and make this a little bit darker, a little bit warmer as I approach the front. I'm going to wet this some more. My paper's already drying. I'm going to put some more blue in my mixture over here. And I'm just going to pull up on some of these. I'm going to go down and along my horizon line here. I'm going to try to keep that as straight as I possibly can. And I'm going to pull up some on these. I'm trying to keep this simple and very loose, so that it's hopefully something y'all feel achievable. All right, so I'm going to pull out a little bit of this right through here. Looks like that's going to be my brightest spot. And I'm just pulling some of this paint out right there. And I'm just using a clean, damp brush to pull that away. Pull in a little bit more of this yellow right through here, because that's going to be my sunniest spot, it looks like. My paper is still damp. All right, I'm going to take and re-wet my paper as it dries. Now you can avoid having this buckle so much if you moisten it on both sides. It helps to have your paper moistened some on both sides, but I just generally didn't do that today. All right, I'm going to make more of a medium yellow. Let's see. I'm going to take some, let's take some of this olive green. I have some olive green here. And I don't know if I'm going to use it full strength or not. I'll put some right in here, because we know from yesterday that this is pretty strong. This is a pretty strong pigment. And I have a little cottage over here, but I don't really want to go on this side of my cottage, because that's going to be where my shadow is. I'm going to put some in my pathway here as well. Put some over here on this side of my path. And pull in some more of my greens. Right through in here. All right. And I'm just pulling these two into one another until I can find a good spot for my more cooler greens to find a home. So I'm taking some of this sap green now, pulling it into my mixture, and then I'm going to take some of my cobalt and mix it in with my sap, and it's going to make a pretty dark green. Make it even darker. And I'm just going to pull in as I get closer up. We know that as we get darker, as we get closer to us, we get darker. Right, in here, I'm going to add a little bit of darkness, and in here, And I'm going to have some trees, so I'm going to add a little bit of darkness in and around the trees here. We'll use that as a start. I'm going to take some of my sea salt, and I'm going to try this again, guys. I don't know if I'll be able to pull the salt off before our live is over, but we're going to keep it on here, and eventually I will, after this is completely dry, I will take it off and let you guys see. This is just regular sea salt. You can use table salt. And, okay. I'm going to take a smaller brush now. And I'm going to dampen it, and I'm going to use some of my brown. Let's see. Let's see. This is kind of more of a goldy color. I'm going to put some of this in and around here. In and around in this way. This way it looks like my sun is kind of peeking through. All right, now I'm going to take my paper towel, and I'm just going to see if I can pull out some of that right there. All right, I'm just lifting up. All right. Now I'm going to use some of my brown. Let me turn my tray around here. So I can get to my browns. Okay, I'm going to try some of this. And I'm putting my darkest dark color on this side because it's going to be closer to the shadow. And I'm just going to do basic like shed building, not doing anything really fancy here because it's going to be covered up. It's just going to be in our backdrop. Just a damp brush now. And it's bleeding a little bit under here. So I'm just going to take my brush and pull that off. A little bit of my Payne's gray, and I'm going to add it here as a shadow, but I'm going to add a little bit of green to it. Some of my Payne's gray and the green, and put it here. You try to stick with the colors that are actually on the ground so that you have a more sensible, I guess I should say. I don't know the word. Comprehensive piece. And keeping it very loose and allowing it to dry on its own gives it this very atmospheric look to it, and I like that very loose background. And as I get closer to me, it will appear more, what's the term I want? There'll be more detail. I pulled this out. Now I don't want it that far, so I'm going to use a larger brush. Some of these paints are very pigmented, and so when you paint with them and you move them around, they do get quite staining. All right, let's see here. I'm going to try this flat. I'm going to wet my flat. I'm just going to go into my Payne's Gray a little bit and pull this over. To my shell. And I'm going to go into my burnt umber, and I'm just going to pull that in with my Payne's Gray here. And I'm going to go ahead and make my wall here in the back. I'm also going to try to create this very straight line right here as a shadow underneath my roof line. And the end of my wall here. Okay. I'm going to go in now and take some of my raw sienna. I'm going to pull down. And I'm pulling in some warmer colors here on the front because we know that this front corner is going to have a little bit of warmth to it. Trying to decide what color I want my roof to be. I may just go straight Payne's Gray on that. What are y'all working on today? I'm going to take some of my cobalt and mix it in with this brown and such, and it's just going to be a very dark roof line on this side. very little Payne's Gray over here on my, I think my cat's trying to wander in here. I'm not overly concerned about the bleed over because I have, I will be covering a lot of this with the trees. Got a little high with this area right here, so pull that off. You can always pull it, well, in most cases you can pull it off if you get it quickly. Just try to get it quickly. All right. I should have some sponges around here somewhere. Oh man, I might have taken them next door. Let's see. Okay. Maybe I'll use this brush. Ay, ay, ay. Hoping to get a smaller one. Use this one. This is a Deerfoot stippler. A little big, a little bigger than what I want it to use. I really want it to use more of a sponge. I think I've taken my sponges next door. Yeesh. We'll see. We'll see how it works. All right, so now I'm going to try to build in some closer foliage here. And I can do that by using my Deerfoot. I'm going to dampen it a little bit. And I'm going to use my mixtures of greens here. I'm going to take off the extra paint on my side. Over here on my side, I have a napkin. And I'm just going to kind of dabble in with some foliage here. Trying to keep as much of the background in it as I can. Mix some more of that because we're going to need it. I'll do some of my cobalt. Cobalt. Let's see what we've got here. And that does make a darker green. Let me get some, let's see, let's get some of this lemon yellow in it. That's pretty. Let's try some of this lemon yellow. As we get closer to the sun, we need those more warm tones. And this is still damp, so it's going to run a little bit, and I'm okay with that. And I'm trying to leave some of what I have underneath everything, because you need that high and low of your work in order for it to look more dimensional. I'm going to go around my sun a little bit. Pull up some of this darker green here on this side. All right, I'm going to work on my path a little bit now. Let that kind of begin to dry. All right, so this is kind of a, I don't know the name of it, but it's kind of a, close to an ochre, yellow ochre color. And I'm just putting it right in. Just a damp brush now, and I'm spreading it. I'm just going to dampen it. But yeah, this is kind of like a yellow ochre, but I think it's more on the, I can't think of the name of it. I'm going to pull out some of this here that got lost with the green. I'm going to mix some of my browns, a combination of some of my browns over here where I started them before. Okay, and I'm going to pull in some of this ochre color that I had, and I'm just going to blend in with some of that, making it a little bit darker as we move towards the to the foreground. And honestly, it just needs to be the whole way across. Pulling it right into this brown here that I laid down. Pulling some of the color up. As it gets closer to the sun, we want it to be lighter. I might pull in some of my yellow over here, closest to this. Brighten it up as it comes along and turns in front of that sun. It'll be brighter here. Let's see. I'm going to pull in some more of these darker tones. Right here along the edge, we're going to have a bit of a shadow. And we'll probably redo this section again. Because I plan on doing some things like some stems and such. I don't know if I have my card or not with me. I like to kind of pull up some stems. If you want some control over where your paint goes, you can tap in. Like I have some little areas where I have some highs and lows of my green, and I can just tap in some of this dark so that it looks like some of the greenery is casting a shadow over top of it. And it's not being overly, it's not the whole thing like it is on the other side. All right, I'm going to make this seems pretty dry. I'm going to take a chance here. I'm going to take some of my Payne's Gray. It's right out of the tube type Payne's Gray. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and add a door here. It's a fairly thick consistency. And it is still bleeding some, but that's okay. I'm just going to pull in on it. And then I can pull this over to make it look as if there's still a shadow here. I'm just pulling that color that's bleeding out over more to the side of this building, this front side of the building where the shadow's being cast. Okay, I'm going to go in with just a damp brush here and pull and straighten that line out. I'm going to go back into my Payne's Gray and my green and cobalt and mixture, and then I'm going to make my shadow over here. All right. Okay. All right, I'm going to go in and try to capture some of my trees here. I'm going to see if I can find, I have a little plastic card that I enjoy using with oh, I know it might be in here. I have different containers for my brushes and tools and stuff, and this is the one I use for mostly I use this for my could use that for my watercolors, but sometimes I put my resin stuff in here. Now I'm not going to find it. All right, I'll just use what we have. But you can use anything that has kind of an edge to it. I used one of those, like my old YMCA card, and I just pull up in some areas and make some grasses, and you don't have to you don't have to pull into it hard to make grasses, but if your paper is still just a little bit on the damp side, it will work. I'm going to tap into some of my watercolor here and pull in some. Tap in some more. And it's going to get lighter as it moves forward. And I'm going to pull in some of this darker green over here next to my building and in front of my building. Just using what's wet. And pull. You can definitely use a you can use a fan brush if you want to. Just know that it's going to be a whole lot more dense when you do that. But don't be afraid to go outside of the box and use something just like you would in acrylics, in a mixed media acrylic. You know, just go for it. But a credit card, like an old credit card, plastic card, would also be very useful. And I know that I'm already starting to see the effects of the salt, which is fabulous. I love that. Okay. We'll hold off on that a little bit more. I'm going to go into just my browns. I'm going to use my smallest brush that I have. Let me see. I guess this is my smallest one, where that came from. My brown mixture here. And I'm going to make some trees back here in the background. Kind of keeping them small. You can turn your paper if you need to keep your brush. If you need more control over your brush, that would certainly work fine. You know, skip around with your limbs because you don't need to see the whole entire limb. With watercolor, it's harder to cover over those darker colors. So just kind of keep that in mind. Using a brown over a green, you're probably using a tone a little bit darker than the green is, and if you had to go back over with some foliage, you wouldn't be able to really cover that as well as you'd want to. I hope that makes sense. I'm just using the very tip of my brush here and making some lines here and there. These do not have to be perfectly straight either. You know, trees have lumps and bumps too. The general rule of thumb is that you want it wider at the bottom, and if you get that perspective, then you've pretty much got it. Try to be very light pressure on your brush. Just the tip. And skip along with your the closer these are, the darker they're going to get. All right, we'll let that dry and we'll move over here to the other side and put a couple of tree limbs. And I'm using a more creamy consistency at this point because I don't want my paints to bleed. It's still a fairly damp surface, and putting a thicker paint will cause there to be a little bit more control over your surface. We're just going to add a couple of limbs to come across our... Oh, I didn't want to go down that far. Okay, so we've got a few trees back here. We've started a few trees back there anyways. Okay. Really creamy consistency at this point with my brown. And I've drawn in these trees, and I'm just trying to find where they're at. Got one right, oops. One about right in here. Picking up some of the salt there. You are quiet today. I'll do a little knob on this one. going to do a tree over on this side here as well, but I'm going to kind of angle this one a little bit. And it's going to kind of go right in front of my little cottage. And remember, we have our sun here. We want to try to keep that sun as much as we can. Really wished I had my sponge. All right, I'm going to go back in with my stick here and add in some more of my greens. All right, I need to mix some more. Make a darker one. And we're going to just add some foliage here and there. Maybe some around these little trees. Sometimes your end on your stick, if you're using a stick, will become a little bit frayed. So just pull that off or whatever you need to do. I'm even going to add a couple of little things of grass here in the center. A little bit more unkept of a path. Let me show you what it looks like with a fan brush here. Pick up some of my I'm moving my salt around terribly. And it just lays it down. You can use it for any foliage. You can use it for your trees, any of that. This is not the best fan brush for it, I don't think. But You just have to experiment with your tools and find out what works best for you. Probably going to go back to my Deerfoot stippler here in a minute. Keeping some of that light from in behind. Okay. I'll go back to my Deerfoot. Remember that some of this, it's all going to kind of blend together, but remember that some of this needs to come forward a little bit because you don't want trees that don't have, that makes it look like all the foliage is behind it or above it. Sometimes it's, you know, just in front of it, and we have to remember to keep that perspective. Okay. Not overdoing it, but you certainly don't want to underdo it either and make it look like it's missing. And I probably will let this, it still seems to be damp up top, so I'm going to let this continue to dry up top, and because it's bleeding on this side, not so much on this side. I want to take some of this salt off, but it's still, I don't want to smear it because it's working. I'm going back to darken this whole area right here. I'm kind of laying my brush sideways with a damp brush, and I'm skipping it, and that helps give good texture. All right, I'm dampening my brush. I'm picking up some of that brown, and I'm trying to kind of just lay my bristles on the side and give it some texture as I go. I'm going to have a shadow come across my path as well because I have a tree. So you need to be mindful of that. We have trees. We have to put shadows in for our trees. And for this one, I'm just going to do some skippy marks because you do have sunlight coming through. So you might have some highlights of your working there. All right, now I'm going to make some shadows to my trees here. And these shadows are going to be coming this way a little bit, so I'm going to use some darker green. I'm going to use some of my sap, and I'm going to use a little bit of my vermilion to make a cooler green. I'm going to put a little bit of my cobalt or ultramarine in there as well. And I'm just going to add a shadow to each of these. Actually, it would probably be going this way on these. So on this one, just play around with it a little bit. All these pieces of salt. I'll put some more of my basic green in there, my sap. I'm just pulling up with my regular old round brush. This is a number 6. You can use a detail brush, you can use your fan brush, you can use a card, whatever you want to use, whatever you feel like you have most control of. You want your grasses to stay in perspective. They're going to get smaller as you move out and larger and darker as you move forward. I'm going to make this turn here with my brown in the path so that we have an actual take some of my raw sienna here, add it. Can't see my grasses anymore. Get back over here and make another shadow on my building. It's really about going back and forth. As it dries, you might need to add more color. What did I do with my brush? Might add a few more little trees over there, or little something that looks a little bit more defined. All right, and we can make some trees around our, or a little bush here beside our shed. All right, let me get some of that green. Some of my Payne's gray. And I'm going to make a little shadow around my bush. And pull it out. A little green and Payne's gray. And I'm going to pull a shadow from on my tree here. Too wet. All right. I'm just defining my horizon line a little bit more. Okay, I have a tree back here I need to add a shadow to. Right here. And here. to take my flat that I had earlier. I'm just going to tap in a couple of little marks here on my building. Kind of make sure you keep in the angle that the building's going. I didn't have my brush quite turned as I should have. Putting some cobalt into this blue, and I mean this brown and Payne's gray mixture. I'll get it out in a minute. I'm kind of putting some shadows here on my tree. And this helps to give me a lot of just some definition. Excuse me. Hard to paint, harder to paint, as you know, a very detailed landscape on small paper. In order to stay loose, you really kind of have to go a little bit bigger. Mix in lemon yellow, cobalt blue, and I think I'm going to do some of my sap green in there. just to darken it a little bit. Maybe a touch of brown. Just to make it a little bit more earthy than what it was. This is pretty creamy. Kind of aiming my brush towards my pathway a little bit to have some of these little foliage areas kind of lean over my path more. Okay. I'm going to use what green I have left here and try to make some little foliage. I might have to make up some more green. And along there, but I'm not going to put any more bushes or anything because I don't want to overdo it. Ooh, fly. Another fly. Just using the side, the actual chisel edge of this brush to actually add some foliage. wanted to do is go in and redefine these a little bit more too, because it was so wet it was starting to just get muddled. So I want to redefine some of this as leaves and not something that's supposed to be more abstract and in the background more. So let me get some of my green. Let me get some of my gold green gold. That'll make a pretty foliage color, especially coming off of a tree that's getting mostly sunlight. I can barely see my sunshine back there. You can lose it really quickly. I'm not really pleased with how dark my pathway got. Let's see if I can pull some of it up. And you do need to be careful because you don't want to tear your paper. That actually got lighter and I made less effort. Pull that back. Okay. Pull my tape. Hey Sheila. How are you? I hope you're well. Thank you, Marsha. Keep your tape close. Don't pull it. Don't pull it up here and pull it straight up. You want to keep that part of it that's actually touching your paper very close to the. Whoops. Paint my tape tour. And take it from this side. Doing this before you say you're done can help you decide whether you need something else on your painting or not. I don't know what happened there, but I don't know if it's still, it doesn't feel like there's still tape there. But it's hard to know. It's weird. All right, I'm not happy with the building. I might go in and play around with the building a little bit more, just because I feel like it needs something. Let's see. I think I have some black here. Let's see. I'm trying to put an edge on my door. Okay. And you can put another window over here to balance it. And that's not at the right angle, so let's see if we can fix it. There. Thank you, Sheila. It is. It is, most definitely. All right, I'm going to see if I can get some of this salt off. I'm going to try not to brush it off. But I want you guys to see the effects. If you can see, it pulls and lifts and leaves this cool effect on your paper. There's still quite a bit of salt left here, but I don't want to pull it completely off. All right, I feel like I need something over here, but anyways, there it is. Not, you know, not acrylics for sure, but there's my attempt at a landscape of a watercolor. I hope that y'all enjoy.